now to introduce Mark Brinkman, who is a CT Corporation account executive, serving CT customers with their corporate transactional and compliance needs in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin. Mark has worked for CT for over 20 years in a variety of capacities as a service representative, manager, and sales professional. Mark graduated from Ohio State University in 1994. He has a paralegal certificate from Capital University Law School and an executive MBA from Ashland University. Mark resides in Columbus area with his wife and his 2 children. Welcome, Mark.
What I'm going to talk about today is we're going to focus on registered agents, just go in the background of registered agents. I mean, obviously, a lot of you probably understand what a registered agent does in general, but I'll go into some more depth about registered agents and the things that they can provide, both commercial registered agent provider, such as CT, as well as individuals. Then I'm also going to cover really kind of an overview of the business entity life cycle. So just really an overview of how entities form, expand into new states, potentially merge, convert to other entity types, and eventually terminate their existence. So all those things that go into how companies move through a life cycle and their existence. And then we'll also touch on Delaware. A big part of corporate law and what CT gets involved with deals with Delaware. And so maybe if you're not really familiar with corporate law, you wonder why does everybody form in Delaware? So we'll go through some of the main areas of why Delaware is such a popular state. And then we'll also touch just on just common document retrieval requests that are available on the public record. I think it's always good to kind of go through what can be retrieved from the public record if and when you need to. So just a little bit more background as far as, I work within those states and with our customers. The customers I work with are both corporate law, corporate legal departments, corporate tax departments, and then law firms. And specifically, law firms that have corporate practice groups, real estate, IP has a need for our services as well. So I deal with both corporate paralegals that work within a corporate legal department, as well as law firm paralegals. So I deal with both types. So just a quick background on CT. We've been around for over 120 years. We really provide 3 core services. That's corporate transactional services. So these are the services relating to retrieving documents from the public record for our customers. Also submitting business entity filings, so forming entities, qualifying or registering them in new states, merger filings, conversion filings, as well as withdrawal or dissolution filings. So really the whole gamut of business entity filings that we're going to talk about in a little bit. Then we also have UCC transactional services. So if any of you have ever had to do or have ever been involved in UCCs, filing UCCs, or doing due diligence searches, that's something else that CT does. And we actually do that out of our Columbus office. If you're not familiar, we have an office, a local office over at Easton, and that is a UCC office. So there's teams of individuals there who assist our customers with their due diligence processes as far as determining what types of liens to search for. Because in addition to UCCs, it can also be tax liens, litigation, open and closed cases, bankruptcy, as well as some more, I guess you could say, exotic lien types like with ERISA, the FCC, some other types of, very industry-specific type of liens that are filed in the public record. So it's a big part of what CT does is UCC searching, and then we also file UCCs across the country for our customers as well, both at the state level, county level. And then the last thing is registered agent services. So being a registered agent for any type of business entity that is registered and has to have an agent. We do that in all 50 states, and that's really been what we've been doing for 120 years. So we have local offices in Cleveland and Columbus, as I said, and they assist our customers with all these various needs. Then we also have products as well for managing corporate records, for assisting our customers in staying in compliance, specifically with annual report filings that you have to file in the states where you transact business. So we have a whole range of services or products that also assist our customers in performing those tasks and keeping their entities up to date and keeping them in compliance. So statutory representation. So I'm going to talk about more or less like commercial providers such as the CT, then also just individual registered agents. So CT, we're a commercial registered agent provider. So this is our business. So what we do as a registered agent, and is everybody familiar with the requirements for a registered agent as far as wherever you do business, so whenever you form an entity or wherever you transact and qualify or register your business entity, you have to appoint a registered agent. And that registered agent has to have a physical location within that state. So that's essentially what we provide for our customers in all 50 states. So any of us here can be a registered agent if we live in that state where the entity is doing business. So you form your own company, you can appoint yourself as a registered agent. If you decide if things are going well and you expand into Kentucky or Indiana, then you'd have to go out and find somebody else to be your registered agent. Maybe if you have a family member or a close friend in one of those states, maybe they could be your registered agent. Or you could come to CT or one of our competitors, and we can provide representation for you. The other thing, too, is how we're appointed is on the formation document or the registration document that's filed with the state. So that's how we become the agent. And as soon as that document is filed, that's when our appointment starts. It ends when that entity is dissolved, withdrawn, merged out of existence. And that's when we stop being the agent, or when an agent is no longer appointed. Now, there's some states, just so you know, that even make an agent stay on for an additional year. So Maryland, for instance. You withdraw in Maryland, you still have to have an agent for one more year, for one more calendar year. So there's little quirks like that throughout some of the states where you still have to keep representation for an extra year or for a small period of time. So that's how we become an agent. So the thing with CT is that we get appointed as agent every day and we don't even know it because no one has to tell us. You can simply form your entity, qualify your entity, and in most states you don't have to inform us. And we literally spend lots of time trying to find entities that we've been appointed that we don't have in our records. Or how we typically find out is through our customer will eventually tell us, oh, hey, we appointed you as agent in this state. We just qualified there. So that's kind of a quirk with what we do, or what a registered agent does, is that you don't have to go to somebody and say, hey, will you be our agent? You could literally just appoint them if they have a physical address in that state, and they can become your agent. So there are some states, though, that do require written consent. So it's a small number, probably 10 to 15, where on the state form, you do have to have the agent actually sign their written consent to be the agent. But for most states, you can simply put their name and address on the form, on the incorporation document or the qualification document, and that starts the appointment. So a lot of our customers think that there's some kind of formal contract that you have to enter into with us, and you actually don't. So we literally every day get appointed, and we don't know it until later on. Yes?
Do you charge them a fee for that?
Yeah, so we have a group internally that kind of scours the public record and finds these entities that we don't have in our records that are on the state websites. And then we identify maybe a potential contact. And then at that point, we'll then send them an invoice for our service. Because for us, what's important too is that we have to have a recipient in our records so that that company does get served, we know what to do with it. Otherwise, and that's what happens sometimes is we get served and we go, we have a process, we go into our records and there's nothing there in our records, so then we go to the state and we confirm, okay, we are the agent. So then at that point, we have to maybe go back to the state, maybe try to find an officer, maybe some kind of contact person, maybe literally you Google the company name and try to find a website, if it's not a big company, and then try to find a phone number and say, hey, who should we send this process to? So that's what it comes down to in some cases. And sometimes, too, it's big companies. You'd be surprised, Fortune 500 type companies that maybe they do a lot of their own filings or they do it through outside counsel, and either outside counsel doesn't use us or they do it direct. And so then we find it and then we realize, just by looking at the name, that it's probably associated with a well-known company. If it's got Walmart in the name, good chance it's probably one of Walmart's entities, things like that. So then we kind of put two and two together at that point. But it's a big process. But most of our customers, I'd say 90% of our customers tell us. They let us know, even if they do the filing on their own, they let us know that, hey, we made you the agent in this state. And that's kind of what I do too with our customers is make sure the records are up to date, make sure everything's accurate so that we're providing the representation that we should be providing. So it's a challenge. But so that's the thing. So anybody can be an agent, essentially, if you live in that state, and they don't have to have your consent to appoint you. So, but getting back to commercial registered agents, because it's our business, we wrap in a lot of various services and features with being a registered agent that can be helpful to you. So customizing delivery instructions, for instance. So we have we have a lot of customers, like you said you do asbestos. So that's a very common type of litigation that's high volume, that some of our customers get significant amounts of asbestos litigation. So we can set up instructions to have all the asbestos go to a specific people or a specific person or even to a third party who processes it for the company. So we can have very specific instructions for asbestos and then different instructions for personal injury litigation or different instructions for medical malpractice. So we have a variety of customers in different industries. So like your hospitals, they have a lot of employee litigation, medical malpractice, they have garnishments, they have other varieties of lawsuits, and they may have different attorneys, paralegals who work on those matters. So we can customize those instructions. So that's the benefit that you get with a commercial registered agent provider, is that customization. Garnishments are a big one. Those tend to go to payroll or HR, because typically legal doesn't want to see a garnishment in a lot of cases. Some they do, or they just want to be copied, right, Marley?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in our team, I have a copy on pretty much everything, and then we have this specific, Jim Roberts, the attorney, and I are copied on everything, and then we have specific people on payroll, copied on garnishment, specific people on corporate, copied on corporate things. So you can have people cover the gamut and have it split up.
Yeah. And the other thing that's unique with garnishments, which I didn't really know this until maybe in the last year, is that garnishments a lot of times with our customers, a good portion of garnishments don't go through the agent because they don't have to. So the governmental agencies can basically send it directly to the company and bypass the agent. So I have a lot of customers where for every 10 garnishments that they get, maybe only 2 to 3 come from us because they go directly to the company. And it's very common, and it's a big challenge.
I don't want to keep interrupting you, but I would note that if you have that situation, they don't have to, but try to get them to go through your agent. They do that on purpose because if they serve for us, if they serve on a restaurant, some of the attorneys do it on purpose because they know if they serve on a restaurant, the restaurant doesn't forward it to corporate, we default. That's how they get paid because then the company has to pay that garnishment out. Guarantee them money. So try to get them to go through the service.
Yeah. There are some plaintiff attorneys who try to do some shady things sometimes. So, and that's also where, if you're using a commercial registered agent, we can help you because we have people internally that can provide affidavits, providing information as far as when things were served, how they were served, things like that. That can assist you if you have to get into a fight over a specific lawsuit. So another good reason to use a commercial registered agent. So garnishments are very, very unique in that a lot of times they aren't going through the agent. So if you get a lot of them, it's something that you have to address, and it can be a big challenge. Just the benefit of using commercial registered agent is that customization that kind of helps the workflow be more efficient. Along with that too, we no longer, in most cases, for a lot of our customers, even send them a hard copy. We scan it and we make it available through a web portal on our website where they can retrieve it and download it, or they can share it, they can email it on to other recipients. So more and more now, a lot of our more larger customers don't even receive the hard copy anymore via UPS. We send everything via UPS that still goes out hard copy, but a lot of our customers just get it electronic now. So that's really where things have moved to. There's still some people who like the hard copy, and we can still accommodate that, but more and more it's becoming electronic completely. So it's just the trend. We create what a commercial registered agent provider also does is creates a transmittal sheet that kind of summarizes the important facts about that case. That can be very helpful, kind of helps you diagnose what's going on and know where to send things. It also, what we also do is we can even provide that information and have it transmitted directly into a matter management system too. So another benefit that commercial registered agents providers can provide and what CT can provide is being able to move data about the service of process directly into a matter management system so that you don't have to rekey it in yourselves. So things like that. And we do that with garnishments too. as far as getting them to like ADP if the customer uses ADP. The other benefit is that we have a nationwide network. So we do have a physical location in all 50 states. So you never have to worry about it. If you're forming an entity or qualifying somewhere, we have a location in that state. We can provide representation in Canada, Puerto Rico, as well as other countries that have some kind of similar registered agent requirement, like the UK, Germany, a handful of others. So we kind of got you covered no matter where you're going to be at. As far as using individuals, there's nothing wrong with using an individual. There are some larger companies that if all of their business entities are centered in maybe one state. Like I can think of one company here where they have 30-some different entities, but they're all in Ohio. They're all Ohio entities. They're all based in Ohio. They're not registered anywhere else. So in that situation, they use general counsel as the registered agent, and that's a pretty good system. It's once you start expanding into various other states where using an individual can be more challenging. The other reason that an individual can be challenging is that individuals like to go on vacation. They retire. They leave the company. And so at CT, we have lots of horror stories about someone leaving the company, they retire, they take a new job, and everyone forgot that person was the registered agent. And it's the last thing you think about, but when that person left, you have to replace that person, which means you have to do a filing with the Secretary of State to make a new individual your new agent. So that's can sometimes potentially be the downside with an individual, is that you have to remember to replace that person. Or if that person does go on vacation, there's not service of process sitting at their doorstep, not being forwarded on to the right people. So we have those kinds of stories. Or even like with law firms, sometimes you have a partner who acts as the agent for his or her clients, and that partner retires, and then they all of a sudden realize when the entities start falling out of good standing that it's because everything's still going to this person who's no longer there. Or if the firm or a firm moves their address, that also requires them to file an update with the state to update the address so that process starts going to the correct address. Now in Ohio, that's very simple because you can do a blanket filing that updates. If you have a law firm and they provide representation for 100 clients, they can file one filing with the Secretary of State of Ohio and update that address in a blanket filing. But there's other states where it's literally you'd have to do 100 separate filings for each client. So there's things like that. So sometimes those are the drawbacks of using an individual. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay. Now I've been talking mostly about representation with the Secretary of State, which is the most common. And like once again, that appointment's done via the formation document or the qualification document. You can also change the agent at any time. A company is free to change their agent whenever they want to. And the way that you do that is every state has a specific change of agent form to do that. So it's a pretty basic filing in most states, and it has to be signed, and then you submit to the state, and that makes the change effective as of the filing date. So just a simple change of agent form that all the states have. Now, we also provide some other types of representation too, and this could come into play depending on who you work for, but we can also provide representation with the Departments of Insurance in most states. Now, not all states. There's some states where we can't really do it, and it's a little bit quirky with the Departments of Insurance in that we can be the address for service of process, but not the agent for service of process. So a lot of states, the Department of Insurance considers themselves to be the agent, and then you can have a CT or yourselves as the address for receipt of service of process. But that's a big part of what we do as well, is providing representation with the Departments of Insurance. And then there's also some states where we can't really do it, or it's depending on, because of how it's structured with the state, we can't provide representation, but for most states we can. There's also a lot of private financial agreements that require an agent for service of process. So we have a lot of times we get this from the law firms where their clients are entering into some kind of contract, and as a part of that contract, they need to appoint an agent for service of process. So we can provide that function as well. And it's usually for a specified period of time, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years, and it's a non-revocable appointment, so we're basically the agent for the duration of that contract. So like things like swap agreements, or maybe you're financing a large piece of machinery, an airplane or something like that, but that comes into play as well, where we can be the agent for a private financial agreement. Also, a lot of federal and state governmental agencies have requirements for an agent for service of process. So mortgage lending, they require a separate appointment for an agent for service of process in the various states. Or it could be, there's a wide variety. I mean, it could be things like if you are a commercial provider of you apply pesticides in a certain state, you might require an agent for service of process. So there's a lot of little quirky requirements that, because of what your company is doing business in, that may require a separate appointment outside of the appointment with the Secretary of State for an agent for service of process. So those come into play too. And then at the federal level, like the FCC, SEC, they have requirements for agents of service of process. Now the one thing about that is there's also a lot of requirements that sound kind of like an agent for service of process, but it's more of a business agent. So a lot of times we have customers come to us and say, hey, can you provide representation? And it might be something that we're not really familiar with. So we have to do some research to determine, because sometimes what they're really looking for is a business agent. They may need somebody who actually can go to meetings, can actually physically represent the company. That's not something that a CT or even one of our competitors is going to do, but that does come into play sometimes. If it's something that's strictly forwarding documents on to the company as a part of a requirement on a form, we can typically do it. But there are situations with some of the state requirements where they're looking more for a business agent than a registered agent. So that's something that if you ever get that kind of scenario, you can call us and we can guide you and explain what we can or cannot do for you in that situation. Independent director and manager, this is a unique type of representation that we can provide that's really focused more on commercial real estate, where you have a special purpose entity, and as a part of securing the assets of that entity, you need to appoint an independent director or manager that really kind of basically prevents the other side from just declaring bankruptcy. So we do this a lot with the banks or with commercial real estate developers. It's a very quirky thing, but it's a very important type of representation that we provide that kind of a small subset of our customers need, sometimes on a regular basis. We have some customers who have hundreds of these appointments, or some customers just have a few, but probably 80% of our customers never really need it. And then international, I kind of briefly mentioned, we can provide representation for our customers overseas in countries that have a similar kind of registered agent requirement, or like Canada, which is very similar to the U.S. There's a lot of the other countries don't really have an agent, but they have to provide maybe a registered address. So we can even do that too. But we can provide representation overseas. So that's kind of a broad overview of the general types of representation. Any questions? Anything that you guys see, with a registered agent or the delivery of service of process that you had questions about? No? Okay. Well, let's talk about kind of the next part of the presentation was just to talk about kind of the business entity life cycle. So really the life cycle that any company can potentially go through, or that really large companies have, as far as how their entities are formed, qualified, maybe amended in some way, maybe they merge or convert out of existence, and then eventually terminate their existence. Before we do that, though, kind of the first step is to talk about naming or name services. So if you're not familiar with corporate transactional work, kind of the first step always is what name are you going to use for your company? Very important. There's lots of horror stories of people who go out, pick a name, get letterhead, get business cards, get a website, and then they find out their name's not available in that state. Somebody already took that name, or somebody's reserved that name. So that does happen. So naming is one, just really a crucial, basic, fundamental step. And how that you can confirm a name availability, a couple different ways. You can do it by calling the state. You can call any state and ask if a name's available, and they'll tell you more or less upon a preliminary search the name appears to be available. So they'll never say that it is available, just that it appears to be available. So they're very careful with their wording. There's also states that have on their websites where you can do name availability searches as well. Or you can just type in a name in the business entity database portion of the website and see what pops up to give yourself an idea of if there might be something out there that's going to be in conflict with the name. What you can also do is to protect yourself, you can do name reservations. So a name reservation locks up that name that you want to use for a small period of time. It could be 30, and it varies from state to state. It can be anywhere from 30 days to 90 days to 120 days, where during that period of time, no one else can use that name. So this is kind of what you do when you know this is the name that you want to use, but you're not quite ready yet to pull the trigger and actually form the entity or qualify it. So what you can do is you can lock it up for a small period of time until you're ready to actually submit the formation or registration document. In a lot of states, too, you can renew it. Some states you can renew it over and over and over again. Other states you may only be able to renew it once or twice. Then you have to let it go. So it's a very, very good thing to use, like I said, when you know you're going to do this filing, but you're not quite ready yet to do it. What you can also do, too, is name registrations. And we actually don't see a lot of name registrations like we used to. But a name registration will lock up a name for up to a year. And so sometimes where companies will use a name registration is when they want to keep the name away from their competitor. And we have some customers that every year they file a name registration, and then every year they just renew it over and over and over again for like 10 years, 20 years, whatever. And just keep doing it because they just don't want that name to be used by competition for any kind of strategic advantage. So, and you can typically do that in all 50 states. It costs more than a name reservation, and I think you also have to provide like a certificate of good standing in some of the states. So it's more expensive, a little bit more difficult, but can be very effective, like I said, for competitive reasons to keep that name away from your primary competitor, things like that. And then there's standards. So the states use different standards for what they consider to be a name conflict. So it goes from confusingly similar to just distinguishable on the record. And then you also have, in some cases, restricted or prohibited words. So you get this a lot in banking. So you got to be, you can't just usually use the word mortgage or lending. Or if you can, you have to get special approval sometimes from another governmental agency like the banking administration. I know New York. I know New York, you have to get special permission to use like mortgage or lending or any kind of other name that kind of connotates banking. And the problem there, and what can happen is, if you're going to register in New York and you're going to use mortgage or lending in your name, you have to get approval from the banking commission first, and that can take 7-8 weeks before you can then go to the Secretary of State and file your formation or your registration. So kind of the real life situation is you have somebody running in your office saying, hey, we have to get qualified in the state now, New York right now, but then all of a sudden you have to tell them, well, you have to wait 7 weeks before we can even do anything else. So those are the kind of things that happen sometimes with certain types of names. Or the name can't be used at all. Like I think Olympic, you can't use the word Olympic, I think, in a lot of states. Trust, yeah, trust too. So just be aware of that. If you ever get involved in this type of situation, there are restrictions on certain names or additional hoops that you have to go through to be able to use those names. So moving on, forming a business entity. So there's really just a common checklist that's involved when you form an entity. Now, kind of the big picture thing is you can form an entity in all 50 states. All 50 states do all the same kinds of filings, but the problem is they all do them 50 different ways. They all have different requirements in most cases. They have different fees. They have different turnaround times for completing them. And they have different requirements even for who can sign the forms or how they can be presented to them. There's still some states, most states can take a scanned PDF copy, but there's still some states, Alabama, New Hampshire, New Mexico, you got to send them the originally signed document. So you still have to do it kind of the old-fashioned way. So there's no uniformity whatsoever. And that's good for CT. So that's where we're valuable because we can walk you through that process. So we don't really want this to ever get too easy. But with that said, also too, if you aren't aware, you can do a lot of things now on the state websites as far as submitting filings that you can do on your own. So it's becoming more and more a challenge for us. But really kind of the general checklist is, once again, you confirm your name's available. So if you're forming a brand new entity, you want to make sure that name's going to be available before you do anything else. That's where maybe you decide whether or not you need to reserve the name. If you're ready to go, you're ready to file it right now, don't need to reserve the name. If you're not sure yet, it's going to be another month, maybe 2 months, then you might want to consider doing the name reservation and spending the extra money to file the reservation. You have your articles of incorporation. So, pretty much every state basically has a prescribed standard articles of incorporation form that you can retrieve off of their website or even off of our website. And like in our case, our website, we make all the forms fillable, so you can actually fill them in on screen. Some of the states still just put a scanned copy, and you can't fill it in on screen as easy. Or you can always, obviously, you can do online filing now too in a lot of states. But you're going to have to, but you can get the standard form, review it. There's going to be different requirements that the state's going to ask of you when you form an entity. Delaware, we're going to talk about Delaware and why it's so popular. Delaware doesn't really have a prescribed form. They have a template. And then you can pretty much kind of customize and ad-lib as you like, as long as you kind of follow their general guidelines. But they don't have a standard prescribed form. And like if you go to our website, we give you kind of the general template that you can use for Delaware if you want to incorporate in Delaware. Then you can take it from there. So like for instance, for LLCs in Delaware, you only need 3 things. You need a name, an agent, and somebody to sign. That's it. That's all you have to do to form an LLC in Delaware. Name, who the agent is, and their address, and then somebody signs. And even whoever's going to sign, they're pretty liberal about that too. I mean, almost anybody can sign in Delaware. So a CT can sign in some situations. We can assign as an incorporator. So they're very lenient about who signs the forms. Other states, more restrictive, ask for more information, require more information, and even can limit who can sign. There's some states that only certain types of officers can sign. Maybe only a president or vice president can actually sign. You can't sign. The secretary, the treasurer can't sign. There's little requirements like that too in the various states. Bylaws. This is something. Bylaws or an operating agreement. Those are, in case you're wondering, those are not required by the state. Those are internal documents. You do not have to submit them with your formation document. We get that question quite often. Do I need to provide the bylaws with the formation document or the articles of incorporation? You don't have to. That's an internal document for how that governs how the entity is going to be managed. It does not have to be provided. We do provide for Delaware. We provide a Delaware bylaw and operating agreement template on our website. You can probably get it off the Delaware website as well. But they don't have to be provided with the filing. You may have to file assumed names. So a trade name, assumed name, trade name, that might be necessary as well in a specific jurisdiction. That's a whole other topic, but assumed names also, where you file also varies from state to state. A lot of assumed names are filed at the state level, but you may also have to file at the county level, or both state and county in some situations. So, but that could be a possibility too. Sometimes assumed names they can be voluntary, they can also be involuntary. So in that situation where maybe your name's not available, what you can do is then use an involuntary assumed name in order to get your entity on record with the state. There could also be trademark issues that you have to deal with. FEIN numbers, you may have to apply for an FEIN number with the IRS. And then licensing, business licensing. You may have to comply with various business licenses in that jurisdiction. If you have a physical location, if you're a retailer, you may have lots of licenses that you have to comply with the city, the county, or even other state governmental agencies. So those are things too that come into play as well. So it's not just like you file at the Secretary of State and hey, you're done. There could be all these other licenses that you have to make sure that you get submitted with the various governmental agencies. Or tax-related permits, sales and use tax, things like that, payroll. Those are all other types of licenses too that you might have to do as well. And those are things that CT can always assist with, but things that you have to worry about. And then you got to organize your corporate records. So you got to make sure you have corporate minute books in place for all your various entities as well. So any questions about forming an entity? Yeah.
I do. Is it just semantics to call a document an article of incorporation or an article of organization?
Yeah, so articles of incorporation is what you use really for corporations, and then organization or formation is what you use for LLCs or LPs. At least that's how I look at it. I know I've kind of been going back and forth between articles of incorporation and formation.
Both ways on different. There doesn't seem to be a distinction in some of the things I've looked at online because I I do go to the Secretary of State's website frequently to look up, especially in my business that work, to look up how a company is, if it's even listed on the Secretary of State's website.
Mhm.
And I see that, those two titles, and they almost look like they're talking about the same thing.
They are. You know, like I said, articles of incorporation is what should really be used for forming a corporation, and then articles of organization or formation for an LLC or an LP.
Okay.
That's how I look at it. Just like bylaws is a corporation, operating agreement is LLC.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a good point. And then like when you qualify, and that actually kind of goes into the next area, when you qualify, like qualify is a generic term, you know, qualify in a state, but we kind of put that, I use qualify more for corporations, and then registration, you're going to register for LLCs or LPs when they're going to go into a foreign jurisdiction. And like when you qualify, typically a lot of the states, the title of the form is application for certificate of authority to transact business. That's typically what you'll see from most states on their forms, application for certificate of authority to transact business. So for qualification, so you form the entity in Delaware, and so now you have to qualify it in Ohio. So this brings us to this slide, and so that's the qualification process. And so very similar to forming an entity in that check name availability, because just because your name was available in Delaware doesn't mean it's going to be available in Ohio. So there could be somebody in Ohio using the name that you used in Delaware. So that's always an issue. So that's also, you know, we have situations where a customer wants to they form in Delaware and they're going to qualify in all 50 states. Well, then we have to start going through all those states and making sure the name's available. And sure enough, a lot of times, depending on the name, there might be 10 states, 15 states where it's not available. So then you have a situation where 34 states you use the name that you've already used in Delaware, and then another 15 states where you got to figure out some kind of variation, where you got to use like an involuntary assumed name of some kind, things like that. So that's very possible. So once your name's available, once you use your name in your home state, doesn't mean it's going to be available in any other states. So once again, you have to check name availability. Might be where you need to determine whether or not you need to do a name reservation in that state to protect the name, if you're not quite ready yet to submit the qualification document. All the states have their own separate unique qualification or registration document, that form that you have to fill out and complete. Very similar to articles of incorporation, it's going to ask you for various kinds of information, officers and directors, or members, managers, if it's an LLC. It may ask you for value of the property within the state, value of property outside the state. That's Illinois. Illinois is the bane of everybody's existence for a lot of reasons, because they ask for that kind of information, and then you have to scramble and go to the tax people, and then they don't know really, and so it holds everything up. And then Illinois also asks for something called paid-in capital. I can't tell you what it is. There's a definition. If you read the definition, your eyes will just glaze over, but you have to figure out paid-in capital. And what happens is people say, well, just put zero. Well, you can't put zero. So you can't even do that. So you can't even like fudge it and just get around it. You got to put a number in there. So that's Illinois. So you have these little quirks like that through some of the states. There's some states, they don't really ask you for much. It's like name, domestic state, registered agent, and then sign it. There's other states where it's all your officers, directors, all your members, managers, all this financial information. You have to do a calculation. Wisconsin makes you do a calculation when you're a foreign corporation of like tax. And then they restrict who can sign the document. Only the president or vice president can sign. So there's things like that, that you run into when you qualify. The other thing too with qualifications or registrations that's challenging is that you may have to, register this company in multiple states at the same time. So it might be 10 states, 15, it might be all 50. That becomes a big project because that's a lot of forms. Some states have multiple forms that have to be completed. And then you have to figure out timing, because maybe whoever is asking you to do this, they want it done by a certain time. It's November 16th, and they want it done by November 30th. Well, that can be really tough in a lot of states, because there's some states where you can get it done in a matter of hours or a day, and there's states where it takes 2 weeks. There's states, if you don't expedite, pay additional money to get it done faster, where it's going to take a month or 2 months. So that's the big challenge with qualifications, is when you have multiple states trying to just manage the whole process of getting everything prepared, properly prepared, getting everything signed, because a lot of times that officer travels, they're in another state, another office in another state, and so you have to track this person down, get them to sign everything, and then you got to figure out how to get everything filed within that time frame. And so that's where we earn our money too with our customers, is being able to coordinate those kinds of projects and getting them done on your time frame. But if you do it on your own, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time that you're spending on state websites, tracking down forms, requirements, fees, getting checks cut, getting them signed, and then getting them sent out to the states, and then dealing with you send a PDF to, you think you can send a PDF to Alabama, but then you find out you can't. And you got to send them the hard copy, things like that. So there's a lot that goes into it. And then the other thing too is there's also post-filing requirements. So New York is a great example. New York, when you qualify an LLC in New York, you have to do a publication in a legal newspaper. Now this is something that when our customers use us, we handle for them. But it's expensive. So to do publication in New York, and we typically do it in New York County, it on average will cost $2,000 to do that publication. And it takes about 6 weeks. So you get your qualification done with the state, then you got to go and you got to publish for 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks in a legal newspaper, and you've got to spend $2,000 extra to get that done. And you really can't get around it. So you have those kinds of things to deal with. It's publication, like Pennsylvania has publication, Arizona has publication. And there's some other states where you file with the Secretary of State, and then you got to file a copy of what was filed at the state at a county. Like Illinois makes you do that. So, and like we'll handle that for you, but you'll file with the Secretary of Illinois, and then you got to send like a copy of that filed document to like Cook County, Illinois, or whatever county you're doing business in. Kentucky makes you do that too. You got to file something at the county level. So there's little things like that you have to do. Kansas makes you do that. So you have these little post-filing requirements that a lot of times people forget about, that you have to take care of. Publication's a big one. You can't overlook that. But there's things like that that you got to be aware of. And then once again, same thing. You have licensing then that you might have to take care of. Because in some, maybe where you're formed at, there was really no licensing. But that could be a whole different story in another state. They could have a whole bunch of different requirements that require licensing at the local level, county level, or state level. So once again, there's no uniformity or standardization about any of this. So, and also too, maybe you got to expand into international markets. Maybe you got to expand into Canada, or the UK, France, Germany. So that could be a possibility too. And that requires a whole new set of things to worry about. Any questions about qualifying, expanding into new states, kind of the general checklist? No? Okay. And then kind of along with expanding, you could have mergers. So you may have to merge. So if you work for a company, they may decide to acquire another company. And so that requires a merger to take place. And so here with mergers, the thing to keep in mind is there is a merger filing that has to happen. So once that happens, though, that begins even more work potentially for you. So you file your merger, and it's easy if it's like two Delaware entities. You file one document in Delaware, and you're done. You have a survivor, you have a non-survivor. But you may have an Ohio entity merging into a Delaware entity, or a North Carolina entity merging into a Florida entity. So then that can bring up questions of, can you do that on one form that both states will accept? Or do you have to do, depending on the state, two separate forms to comply with state A and then comply with state B? So sometimes you can get it done on one form, or if both, like I said, once again, if both entities are in the same state, it makes it very much a more simpler process. But you could have possibly two different merger documents that you have to prepare and get submitted to meet both requirements of both states. But the real work starts in that you might have a scenario where you have a survivor that's doing business, let's say in 10 states, and a non-survivor that's doing business in 20 states. So once you do the merger, that non-survivor is no longer active in the home state, but they're still active in those other 15 states. The other states don't, Delaware doesn't talk to the other states, or the state where the merger was filed, they don't send out an email or notification to any other state saying, hey, this entity is no longer in existence. They just merge out. You got to tell them. You got to do what's required in that state to get rid of that entity, to terminate that entity's existence. And then you got to figure out, in kind of the scenario I'm talking about, if they're in 10 states and the non-survivors in 15, if those are different states, you got to figure out now if the survivor needs to be in any of those states where the non-survivor was. So that's where it gets kind of complicated. Yes?
So then are those services that you guys provide?
Yeah. So we do this all the time, but we can take you through what's going to be required, because what's unique about with mergers or conversions is that some states don't make you formally withdraw. Some states make it very simple, actually. All you have to do is get a certified copy from the home state reciting the merger. It's like cert-ray, or just a certified copy of the merger document, and you can send that to that state, and that removes the non-survivor. That's all you got to do. So those are the best states. It's very quick, clean, it's done fast. Other states, you got to do a formal withdrawal, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But you got to do the formal withdrawal, and some states still require tax clearance. And in some states, tax clearance can be months. It can take months to get a tax clearance. So that's where you have to then figure out what states take a withdrawal, what states will just take the certified copy, and then there's also a handful of states that have their own specific form for a merger. So then you got to find that form. Yes?
I recently had one where they required a certified copy of conversion documents.
Yeah.
However, Ohio no longer has certified copies of conversion documents. Now they give you a certificate. So the state couldn't figure out that Ohio doesn't.
And they wouldn't take it.
So I had to put the certificate on top of a copy of the.
Yeah.
That's all.
I think somebody else does that too. I remember running into that situation a couple years ago where we had to figure something out. We had to explain to the state, look, this other state they don't generate it anymore. And they're like, well, we don't care. That's kind of how the response was. Just get us what we want. And it's like, well, we can't. And then finally, I think we had to talk to somebody on behalf of our customer, and they were willing to take what we could provide to them from the state. Yeah. 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 So some states have a state-specific form for that exact type of situation of a merger or a conversion. So you got to find that form, make sure that's filled out properly. And then once again, you got to deal with all the timing issues. We have a lot of customers right now. It's the middle of November, and it's like, we want to get out by December 31st. Okay, well, that's now a huge task in certain states, because even if you pay the extra money to expedite, you might not be able to do it because of tax clearance requirements. So there's things like that.
That tax clearance, that's crazy. That tax clearance
Yeah.
that they require.
Yeah, I mean, Jersey, Montana for some reason.
Ohio is taking forever to get them.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to dissolve at the end of the year, and we can't wait for tax clearance.
Yeah, I know. I mentioned Montana because Montana takes like 6 months or something like that, and you just wonder what's going on in Montana. So, yeah, there's not a ton of business activity. I mean, it's not like it's California or even Ohio. It's like Montana. So what's going on? So, but it takes forever, and that's what you deal with. Now, sometimes with mergers, though, what's nice, like I think PA, Pennsylvania, and actually I think New Jersey, if it's a merger or conversion, you can get around the whole tax clearance requirement. So they don't, because they basically say that the survivors they're assuming the tax liability. So a lot of times, because Pennsylvania is the worst when it comes to withdrawing. That's like a 2-year process to withdraw in Pennsylvania. So if it's a merger, then you can get around it because the survivor will just assume the liability, and so you don't have to wait on these tax clearance. Yeah. So that's what you're going to be dealing with if you ever get involved in a merger project. That's what's going on, is dealing once again with all these requirements. Also, too, typically how this kind of project will go is if you're going to be putting the survivor in the same state where the non-survivor was at, you have to do a qualification. So it ends up becoming 2 filings. You have to submit the withdrawal or whatever is required to remove the non-survivor and then put the survivor in there as well. And so a lot of states, what's nice is they'll do them simultaneously. Like we can literally present both filings to them, to the state, and they will file the withdrawal and then immediately file the qualification simultaneously, within 2 seconds of each other, basically. Now, there are some states, though, that will they'll make you wait until the withdrawal is on record, which could be a day or 2 days, and then you got to do the qualification.
I had a state actually return, I sent them both together, and they returned the withdrawal, well, we can't take those yet, or they returned the new filing.
Yeah. Yeah. There could be amendments. So sometimes when you merge, the survivor wants to use a new name. They might want to use the non-survivor's name. So then that is another quirk within the merger document, and that you got to amend the name in the merger document, but then now you might have to do amendments in the foreign jurisdictions. So that's another possibility. And then you got business licensing. A lot of times with these bigger mergers, companies have lots of licenses out there scattered throughout the various locations and counties, cities. And so every one of those licensing authorities might have a different process for transferring a license to the survivor. And maybe there is a transfer that can be done or an amendment, or maybe it's you just got to file a cancellation of the existing license and then file a new one. And so that's a whole process. A lot of times that tax departments are going through, and they're basically just dialing up all these locations saying, what do we have to do? And sometimes it's like, oh, just send us a letter. Oh, well, we'll do it right now. And that's all you have to do. Then others, it's like this, 2 or 3 different forms. So that's another issue that you run into with mergers, is how to transfer licenses or make sure your licensing's in place to reflect the survivor. Same thing with UCCs. If you have a bunch of UCCs under the non-survivor's name, where they are the secured party, you need to update those UCCs so that the survivor is now the secured party. So that's other additional filings that you might have to do. So like your banking, think of banks. They could have thousands of UCCs where they're the secured party and they merge. They got to update all that information. Ongoing compliance and change filings. So these are like name change amendments. Very common is that a company's been doing business and then they want to change their name for competitive reasons, marketing reasons, or their name has become known for something really negative. They want to change their name. And so then that requires name change filings in any of the states where they do business. Or it could be updating capital structure if it's a corporation, or updating officers and directors. Now with officers and directors, a lot of times you can do that on the annual report filing that's due in each state every year. That's usually typically where that's done. You don't usually have to do an amendment filing with the state, but in some situations you might have to. Or your principal place of business, the company moves. So they relocate to another part of town, another state. You got to update all of that. You got to change the old address with the new address in all those various states. That can usually be done too on the annual report filing that the tax people are probably doing. But sometimes you don't want to wait because if the next annual report's not due for say 6 months or 9 months, you may not want to roll the dice that you're going to continue to get all your mail during that time. So you may want to do whatever's necessary to update it now so that the state has the right address. So there's things like that. Annual report filings, if you're not familiar with annual reports, basically wherever you do business, wherever you're registered, pretty much every state requires you to submit an annual report. For LLCs, a lot of times, it's nothing really more than you're paying them a fee. Like with Delaware, there really is no report. You're basically just sending them $200. But we have customers that have 1,000 LLCs in Delaware. Like commercial real estate developers, they have an entity for every one of their properties. They'll have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 LLCs in Delaware. So times that by 200, that's what they're paying every year. But it's just simply sending them the money, and you can do it electronically. But then with corporations more, there is an actual report where you have to provide them with some information. You have to give them their current list of officers and directors, or at least all the officers and maybe some of the directors. Like Delaware's like that. I think Delaware, you just give them at least one director. If you have a new address, that's where you communicate it. With Delaware, they make you do the franchise tax calculation. So you got to pay your franchise tax. So some of the annual reports are really more of a financial document, with wanting a lot of different financials. That's why tax a lot of times does those. And then some of them are just more something that legal handles, where it's just literally you're just going to update certain pieces of information that the legal department knows about, and you pay the fee. But you have to do them. If you don't do them, then you fall out of good standing, which you don't want to do if you're still doing business in the state. So it's a big job, especially if you're a really large company with various entities. We have customers that have thousands of these to do. So typically, a lot of times handled by tax, but sometimes legal does them. There's some states that don't have a requirement. Ohio doesn't have an annual report. And then for LLCs, there's states that don't have any kind of statutory requirement, like South Carolina. Pennsylvania doesn't have an annual report. So there's some states where you don't really have to do anything. And there's a few states where it's biannual, so you do it every other year. A lot of times it's based off the anniversary date of when you began doing business in the state. But then other states just have the same day every year. Like Delaware, March 1st for corps, no matter when you began doing business in Delaware. June 1st for LLCs, no matter when you began doing business. Once again, as far as ongoing compliance, if business licensing, once again, you have ongoing compliance there. You have to renew those licenses every year, every 2 years, maybe every 6 months. So somebody has to take care of that. Assumed name filings, those expire. So if you have assumed names out there, a lot of states, they expire, typically like 5 years, maybe 10 years. Some states, they don't expire at all. UCCs, you have a portfolio of UCC liens, like your banking. You think of your banks, they have to keep making sure that they renew or continue UCCs as necessary. Then change in entity structure. So then if you decide that, hey, you have these corps and you want to turn them into LLCs, that's a whole process, similar to a merger process of doing the conversion and then doing the post-conversion filings. And typically what we see is you typically convert corps into LLCs. You typically don't see it the other way. So it's usually, everybody typically wants to, if they're going to convert, they typically convert to an LLC. And pretty much every state allows it now, but I think there still might be 1 or 2 states that don't allow it. I'm thinking of like Wyoming or somebody. I don't know. So it can pretty much be done, but I mean, that's fairly recent. I think as up until like maybe the early 90s, conversions were still kind of you weren't able to do them in all the states. So those are some of the things you have to think about as far as ongoing compliance and change filings. And the last thing would just be terminating entity's existence. So in the home state, you're going to dissolve the entity. In the foreign state, you're going to withdraw them. Once again, every state has a specific form for dissolution or for withdrawal. But the big thing about terminating is the tax clearance that you might have to deal with in certain states. So the application for withdrawal is what you file with the Secretary of State, and then you might have things that you have to do with the Department of Revenue, like the tax clearance or maybe some other kind of form. So those are things you have to think about. And like I said, tax clearance, some states it can take six months. It can take a year. Pennsylvania, it takes 2 years. There's like 3 different clearances you have to get, 2 or 3 that you have to get. Department of Labor and some other department, and it takes forever. I've seen customers go on maternity leave and then come back. I had a customer like a year and a half of basically being out and came back and took over that withdrawal in Pennsylvania. Started it and picked it back up a year and a half later. So, assumed names, licenses, once again, those all have to be taken care of as necessary as well when you terminate your entity's existence in a state. There's a lot of companies that either intentionally or unintentionally they stop doing business in that state, and so they don't do anything. They stop filing the annual reports, and they let the entity go revoked. And so that's another way of kind of unofficially stopping your existence. So you can do that. The states don't come after those companies and say, hey, you need to file your annual report or you need to withdraw. But if you ever need to start doing business again in that state, then you have to reinstate. You may have to file and pay all the back-end reports and pay a bunch of other fees to resume doing business, and that can get very expensive. And that could be $10,000, $20,000 worth of extra fees if all of a sudden you need to get back in there and start doing business again. But it's very common for companies just to say, we're not there anymore officially, so we're not going to do anything. And we can stay revoked, we don't care. So that's their decision. You can definitely do that. Like I said, the states don't have I don't think they have the resources to come after people to make them reinstate or make them formally withdraw, or make them pay the annual reports. So That's another way. And if they become revoked, then there is a process, and that process varies from state to state as to how you get them back into good standing. So most states have a reinstatement process, an actual form that you fill out that reinstates the entity. So any questions about terminating? No? All right. Why Delaware? So if you're not familiar with Delaware, why is it so popular as a formation state? Well, it's really 4 reasons. So first is it's a business-friendly environment, and that's really because of the case law, court system, and just the divisions of corporations. Kind of the other three points on there. The court system there, the Chancery Court, it's a very pro-corporate, pro-business type court. The judges tend to be people who have worked in business, that are business-oriented people, and so they tend to rule favorably for corporations. So you tend to get a favorable result in Delaware, and so that's one reason why so many companies like to be formed in Delaware. And along with that is the case law, because the case law is very vast. There's a ton of case law that pretty much provides predictability about any kind of situation that a company might be running into. And so they kind of know going in, based off the case law, how things are going to be ruled. So case law is very extensive in Delaware compared to other states. The corporations division in Delaware is by far, the most efficient and easiest to work with, both for, the public as well as for somebody like CT. It's very efficient. You can get things done as quickly as possible. I mean, this is a state that has 30-hour service or 30-minute service. So if you need something filed in half an hour, they will do it. It costs you an arm and a leg, but they will do it. Whereas other states, it's like maybe one level of expedited service, and that's all you get. So, and they actually really work a lot with us. I mean, we have a conference with them every year with all the registered agent providers and the law firms in Delaware. They meet a 2-day conference, and they talk to us, and we have this good relationship. They give us access to their database, so we can print out good standings from their database. We don't need to go to the state and have them do it. So they do things like that, where they work with the agent providers. They'll work with the local law firms there, and they provide different levels of service. They're very flexible as far as, once again, there is no really standardized form. It's a template, and they're pretty lenient on what's in that template. So, just very easy to work with. They have extended hours of operation. I mean, you can do something in Delaware up to 11 o'clock at night. So, it's just much better to work with Delaware than really any other state. And this is an example of their cutoff times. So these are the level of expedited service. So if you needed something filed in Delaware, you can get something done in half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hour, same day, 24-hour or routine. And routine's 5 to 7 days, which is better than a lot of states. That's better than some states' expedited service. So, and we do lots of half hour, 1 hour, and 2 hours on December 31st.
No party.
That's when, it's when every paralegal is stressed out. So lots of mergers, lots of things going on in the last week of December, and we do a lot of these. So, but it just makes them such an advantage to work with Delaware and do things in Delaware compared to other states, by far. Yeah.
But speaking of other states, I heard recently that, is it Kansas or somebody that's becoming the second Delaware? One of the Midwestern states, I can't remember if it wasn't Missouri.
I don't know. I haven't heard that lately. There's some states that like that. I think they're kind of trying to market themselves as that. I know Nevada used to do that too. So, and I think there are some reasons, some good reasons to be in Nevada, tax-related reasons. Because that's the irony of Delaware. It's not like they're that cheap as far as tax. A lot of people think, it's about tax, but it's really not. I mean, you can pay an arm and a leg to be in Delaware. Depending on the number of shares you have, it can be expensive as a corporation to be in Delaware, compared to a lot of other states. But no one that I know of, no other state has even come close. I mean, I don't know. I know other states. They know what Delaware does and how they do it, but yet they don't replicate it really seriously. I'm not quite sure why. I mean, there's probably a lot of political and other kinds of reasons that prevent them, but you would think other states would really try to go after Delaware, and try to really compete with them, but no one really still is at their level. It's seriously at their level, I would say. They still get the and it's so ingrained now with corporate attorneys and paralegals. Oh, just Delaware, that you can't. I don't think the other states can really compete all that well, with them.
But if you get registered in Delaware, you still have to do all the foreign registrations, right?
Right. Yeah. So, like I said, I mentioned like we have customers that have like 1,000 Delaware LLCs. Like a lot of times, like your commercial real estate developers, where the property is located here in Ohio. It's like a shopping mall or something. So they'll form a Delaware LLC and then they qualify in Ohio. So they do two filings. So they don't just do an Ohio LLC. They do because there's benefits to being in Delaware. So they form in Delaware and then qualify where that property is actually located.
So why is that? Can you be more specific as to why that's an advantage to file? If you're not going to have a retail establishment outside of Ohio, what's the advantage of filing in Delaware and then qualifying in Ohio?
I don't know specifically. It's tax driven.
Okay.
There's still tax benefits.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not an expert in that area. That's a good question for attorneys and tax professionals. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. There's still so much tax benefit to being like an LLC in Delaware compared to a corporation maybe in another state. But you'll see that, where literally they always form everything in Delaware and then qualify wherever that property is located. Yeah. So. Just quickly, document retrieval. This is another thing that comes up kind of along with the business day life cycle. But retrieving documents from the states, this is kind of a list of the types of documents that you can get from the Secretary of States, and really from any Secretary of State. So a good standing is the most common, and that's a generic term, good standing. A lot of states have their own language for what they call a good standing. It could be a subsistence certificate. It could be letter of authorization or certificate of authorization. But that's very common. We order these every day for our customers, and they're needed for financial closings. Typically, you have to have you have to prove that the entity is in good standing. But then you also certified copies of documents, also very common, also typically used in financial closings. At least they have to be certified. And typically, all the states will let you get, everything that's on record. They'll let you get just specific documents, or they'll let you even get, if there's restated documents, which is basically everything that's still active as an amendment, et cetera, they'll let you just obtain restated forward of those documents. Or then there's even, you can just get a cert ray of a merger, cert ray of a name change, things like that. So typically all the states have various options of the documents that you can retrieve. And then they can be certified or they can be plain. And typically, sometimes why you might get a plain document could just be for your personal internal reasons. Maybe you went through the corporate records for that entity and you realize that you're missing the articles of incorporation for some reason. Things happen. Somebody, who knows, somebody forgot to scan it and then the hard copy got thrown away. So you can go to the state and order a plain copy. You don't need it to be certified. Things like that. So certified or plain, certified is going to cost you more. You get a nice certificate typically saying it's exact true copy from the state. And then also at the bottom, authentications, legalizations. That's where you get documents authenticated to be used in foreign countries. We do quite a bit of that, especially for companies that operate overseas. And then we can even do bring down letters, which is something that CT can do, where we will confirm that the entity is in good standing and then put on our letterhead stating that fact. Sometimes those are used for opinion letters by attorneys. Or we can do verbal good standings too. We can call the states, confirm they're in good standing, and provide that information to you. So just some of the things that we can provide as far as public record retrieval, or that you can even do yourselves through the state websites. That's it. Questions?
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. For those of you who remember our prior website, it was very text heavy. And while I know that there were a lot of people who, when we moved the cheese, we only reclassified. We put in a whole lot of photos. All the information's still there. We just moved things around, but it really is still there. All right. And of course, you might notice also our URL now is clerk.franklincountyohio.gov. That's in keeping with all the, most all of the county offices. There's a whole shift of what needed to be changed. So, pictures. For those of you who know anything about statistics and activity out there, why do we go to Facebook? Does anybody know why? The majority of users on Facebook are women. Go figure. Why? Because we post pictures out there. We want to see who's doing what and with whom. So we used a lot of photos. We put a lot of photos. Above the line, you'll see a carousel that moves. Below the fold, if you will, we have these 6 stationary blocks. And each block is a classification. And we're going to get into each of them individually. The e-file block is just that. And it's super, super easy to know where you are because you just hover over everything and it tells you case information online, public records information, et cetera. When moreover, all the divisions, all the legal divisions that we're involved with. The social media court resources. This is a new block of information, and I'll tell you why we did that when I get into that section. About us, who we are, what we do, et cetera. And also there's some other elements of the other courts there. And then our auto title. There's a navigation bar along the left side. We thought we'd be really cool and we come up with these little icons and everybody would know what those were, right? Well, that didn't work so well. So what we did is when you click on the navigation or the toolbar, not only will you see the little prompts like home, it tells you this is home. And the little scales of justice are the legal divisions. We got done with phase 1 of the new design, and you think that we're done, but no, we're going to go into phase 2 as well. Phase 2 is, okay, what did we find out from people we brought in and asked them, you know, what did you find difficult about the new site? For the benefit of all of you who are paralegals, you'll notice on the left-hand side a little area that's really going to be helpful for you because it's all the forms and all the fees that you need to worry about in all of our divisions. The other thing that you'll notice are the quick links. And for those of you who also will rely on case information online because maybe you have to look up a case, you're maybe not on that case and you're not getting the e-filing notifications, but you want to check something out, there's the case information online. And you'll also notice CIO, public records. You can also click on that block. I don't know that there's necessarily anything other than that, but I will mention something. For those of you who may be interested in just traveling overseas or maybe taking an extended stay out of the country for the next 4 years or 8 years, I don't know, and you need a passport, we've got passports. We manage passports. We accept those applications. We take your photo on site. It's one-stop shop, and it's in the courthouse at Mountain High. So for those of you who are interested in getting your passport, it's good for 10 years. We don't verify, Teresa, that you're going to get your passport right now. We just accept that application, and we do take your photo on site, and we're competitive in the photo-taking business market. So you can go to CVS, you can go to Walgreens and get your photo, but I mean it's just as inexpensive at our place, and it's all done right there. You just need to bring the completed application and your checkbook, because when we send in the application to the Department of State, they require a check. No cash. Okay, let's go. Because we are the clerk of courts to the Court of Common Pleas and the 10th District Appeals Court, we manage and process and maintain and file and receipt and review all the legal documentation in those courts, right? Well, we also, as a county authorized by the state of Ohio, we manage, process, and transact auto titles. So Jennifer, your Lexus is going to be on for sale on Craigslist. I see it. I'm going to buy it from you in that private sale. I need to have proof that I own that, and that is a legal document. Auto titling is done in this county in 4 offices that we have throughout the county. We manage the auto title. Notice I did not say license. I didn't say license plate. I didn't say registration. Licenses, driver's license, license plates, and the registration is a state BMV, okay? Understand the difference? That's recurring, you know, you have to have it renewed, your driver's license renewed every so many years, your license plate renewed every year or 2 years if you buy the, you know, the extended deal. But your auto title, that title and proof of ownership is a county entity and through us, all right? And on the county, on the auto title page, click. We tried to make the page look somewhat similar because it is its own kind of business entity. We try to make it look similar to the main clerk's website. Again, this will probably change a little bit in phase 2, but suffice it to say that you know, if you're an Ohio resident, we give you information. If you've transferred out of state, sometimes we'll get calls from you know, from the law firms. Hey, you know, we got a new partner that came in, and he's got to or she's got to get her license transferred to the state of Ohio. There's where they go. Business services is primarily for the dealers, and then we've got some fiscal reports. So let's go ahead and go live. For the benefit of you and PACO, let me just go ahead and click on e-file first. We've grouped everything for you by division for e-filing benefit. So if you are, if you do work for, if you go to work for Leanne Masucci, is that her name? Masucci. You'd go to the Domestic Relations Division because that's where she and Colleen Marshall and her Amir, I can't remember her name. They do a lot of domestic filings. There's a filing guide that'll give you all sorts of information on how to e-file in the domestic court through our office. You don't have to click on all of those. We'll just kind of hang here. Nah. Unique behaviors, again, almost all of them have something about unique behaviors. We try, and this is something I just learned, my vernacular had to be corrected. All of the Court of Common Pleas Legal Division's administrative orders relating to e-filing are here, okay? So all of the Court of Common Pleas, General Division, Civil and Criminal, Domestic Relations and Juvenile, those administrative orders as they relate to e-filing can be found here. So if there's any updates, they're going to be here.
In the domestic division specifically, or just on this screen?
On this screen, in here. So if the domestic relations has a change in something relative to length of time that you have to file, or there's some new style guide or whatever that relates to e-filing in domestic relations, we will update it here. You can go to the Domestic Relations Court site as well, but I'm just telling you it's here. Now, just as a point of reference, so you understand, because like I said, I just learned this vernacular. As far as the local rules go for all of the stuff that happens in the Court of Common Pleas, I'd recommend that you go to those court sites. So if you need to find out what are the local rules for the Domestic Relations Court, not e-filing, but for the court itself, go to the Domestic Relations Court site. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, okay. All right, click through. And so for the point of reference, you notice that John went to the back tab. That's one option, or you could have always used the navigation bar. All right, so you could choose to go back tab, or let's go to the legal divisions, I'm sorry. The legal divisions, there you go, that one. There you go. All the legal divisions are here, Court of Common Pleas and the Court of Appeals, 10th District Court of Appeals. Click on the domestic relations. For the benefit of those of you who are interested in knowing, each of the legal divisions presentation is the same. It's about that division. We've got FAQs, those frequently asked questions, and forms and fees. Where else can you find the forms and fees? Not sure where to begin. So if you want to go to not sure where to begin, you can get to forms and fees real quickly, or you can go to the specific divisions. So let's stay in here and just click on an FAQ page real quick. We get a boatload of questions, just so many questions about getting copies of divorce and dissolution documents and stuff. We've provided people a kind of an overview of this is what you do, this is how you can order your copy. As I'm approaching retirement in the next probably 2 to 4 years, I will probably have to resurrect a copy if I can't find my copy of my divorce. I'll go here, I'll get my copy of my divorce so I can go to Social Security and present that information for you. I don't know if you've been... You've done it, see. Talk to Vicki, she'll tell you how to get through all this stuff. Okay, let's go to CIO. How many of you use a case information online? Yep. Click on that, please. I want to bring up a couple things. Number one, trust me when I tell you that the disclaimer is just quick and easy, just accept it. You don't need to read through it all. Everybody has it. You know, we accept Google like that. We accept, all these different disclaimers out there. Go ahead and just accept it. It's, otherwise if you don't accept it, then you can't move forward. I'm going to try to point out just one little thing. I point this out as often as possible with folks. You see underneath the word information, that solid blue line right there? See right underneath the letter N in information, that solid blue line. Yep. You're not on there. Right there, that line. No, there you go. Everything to the left is one element. Name, court. Everything to the right is a second element, case number. Don't try to fill both elements. Because if you do, you get this like, I can't do this, I don't understand, my brain is overwhelmed, I can't do it. So if you type in Smith John, then just go with Smith John. And if you know, for example, let's go to, yeah, that's good. Okay, so we know that John Smith has got a whole bunch of judgments and all sorts of other things. Let's go ahead and type in 16, go to DR, go to CV, thank you, CV, and just do 1632. That should work. Wow, look at that. Look at that. I'll be darned. So either fill in the names or fill in a case number. Now, let me just show you a little tricky true. Now, can you do this for me? Select docket category. Don't click on it right now. Just pull down the menu. There. See what happened? You know how a docket shows, and we've got all those PDFs, and sometimes the case is like this long, and you got to scroll through all the hearings that have been posted out there in the PDF form, and you're going, oh, for God's sakes, where's the complaint? Why don't you go ahead and click on motion? You're almost there. There you go. Now look what happens. Just the motions show up. Quick, easy. This is a little secret hint for you all. Good. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Is that good? Did I give you something that you can walk away with and you can get your job done faster? Okay, good. All right, public records and financial reports, pretty self-explanatory, but well, we've asked, it's kind of funny, people submit public records requests and they say, I need you to email me a copy of my divorce decree. And guess what they don't provide us? An email address. So while we can't tell you you have to fill out everything, please use, your common sense or encourage others to, the attorneys that you work with. I'm gonna probably burn for that one, right? Okay, let's go ahead and look at the toolbar again. And my favorite part is, let's go to online resources. Remember I was telling you how things are different and how things are the same? Well, I've shown you the things that are still the same. E-filing hasn't changed. The landing page is the same. Our case information online is still the same. This, however, this was something very important to me. So many so many questions are asked of the clerk of court's office that has nothing to do with our office. Nothing to do with our office. Case in point, I need a copy of my marriage license. Sorry for your luck, we only deal with the bad end, the domestic relations side of things. But who manages marriage licenses? The probate court, and that's not us, it's a separate entity. But I'm of the work ethic person that says, how can I help you find this? Because I don't like to tell people that's not our job. That's not in my vernacular. So if people get in touch with us, I want to tell them where to go, because I like to tell people where to go. And how to get there. Thank you, Teresa. That'll be my little follow-up line. So what we decided as we were going through this redesign is that we would put out here anything and everything that has to do with those kinds of questions that people would ask us. So guess what? Legal resources, click on legal resources. First block. This is our catch-all go-to for folks who, with legal aid, because I think you were involved with legal aid and some stuff. We try to put everything up here that would be of help to people. Moreover, for those pro se filers, I know you don't like to hear those words because you want to have people come in through your office so that your attorney gives you work to do and that you're gainfully employed. But we've put down all the different libraries where people can access information. Franklin County Law Library, would you click on that block? There you go. Excellent. They are a wealth of information. If you have not used their resource, they provide a boatload of forms. And if we don't have it, they will. So just as an FYI, they group them out very nicely. Okay, go back, arrow back, please. And court resources, click on that. Again, look at what those are. All the courts, all the courts. So again, I don't want people to come to me and then me have to tell them, well, you're going to have to go to this other website, and then you have to click on this, and blah, 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 blah. I just figured, you know what, just go to our website, click on online resources, click on court resources, there you have it. We get a lot of questions about United States Bankruptcy Court, but they ask us for their copies of their bankruptcies. That's not us, that's not the Court of Common Pleas, that's not the 10th District, it's the federal court, okay? Let's go back arrow. To the right of that is Franklin County Government. Our colleagues, the treasurer, the auditor, the sheriff. And what we also tried to do is we tried to put in little hints like, oh, you need a documented deed? This is where you go to the recorder. So I also wanted to be kind of a teacher of civics, because I don't think they're teaching civics or political science anymore in schools. Because I don't think anybody knows there are 3 branches of government anymore. I think they just think that, the 3 branches are olive, oak, and maple. I'm not sure. But we tried to give people an overview of what you would find there. And hopefully, this will get a little bit more traction on our website. Okay, back arrow. Scroll down here, government resources. How many of you work with other courts or other clerk of courts offices throughout the state? Look what I've provided right here, right in the middle. OCCA, all 88. If you click on that just real quickly, I wanted to show you. Go up to county clerks at the top tab, click on that. They alphabetize it for you.
Nice.
Isn't that nice? So see, you don't have to do any kind of internet search. Where are you going to go? You're going to go to clerk.franklincounty.ohio.gov, and you're going to find it.
Just name it Move the Cheese.
You know what? I wish we could have, but I think I for some reason, Move the Cheese. Hi, I'm from Clerk Mary Ellen O'Shaughnessy's office. Our website is Move the Cheese. Teresa, that's maybe why I'm going to stay in marketing and promotions. You do a great job as a paralegal and helping those attorneys. This is what happens after 6 years of working with so many of you. It's like, let's go out afterwards. Okay, back arrow, please. I mentioned something about passports. We don't need to click on that, but there is everything you need to know about passports. The notary, if you're a notary and you have to register your notary in our county, that's where you'll go. Media, pretty self-explanatory. Would you click on social media, though? You know, there's this thing called the internet. Oh, we're using it. But we tried to populate our social media site with, you know, everything that we promote out there through Facebook, tweets, Instagram, and YouTube. I would ask that you subscribe, follow, and like us, because it's important to me that you like me. Remember me telling you about how women like, the more women use Facebook primarily for photos. Now, you'll find a lot of photos. John does an exceptional job of putting together some collages on Facebook. If you didn't see the most recent one, we had a really nice selection of photos from last Thursday's Veterans Day parade. There's some really nice photos, and they were all local folks. And then Clerk's News. That is the beautiful Mary Ellen O'Shaughnessy, who doesn't look a day over 50. I wish I was so lucky with those kind of genes. But we keep our annual reports out there. For the benefit of those of you who might have to pull some information, would you click on the current 2015? We'll update this, of course, into next year. But go on to legal divisions, and just for the record, scroll down to civil, please. There we go. Keep going a little bit further. Stop right there. In 2015, look at how many judgments we processed through our office, over 56,000. In 2014, it was higher. It was over 63,000. So when I tell you that the Franklin County is the most robust of all 88 counties with activity and filings and so on, this is just one indicator of just how busy we are. So in case any of you have to do any kind of a comparison, your attorney says, just out of curiosity, do you know how many, judgments are filed in Franklin County? You can say, I'll get that for you, just give me a little bit of time. And then either call me up and I'll tell you how to get here, or you can go there direct and you'll come back to your attorney and he or she will be most surprised.
And duly impressed.
And duly impressed.
Do you have the number of trials that you actually do? Is that part of your report?
As far as the number of trials, you know what? All that information is reported through the Supreme Court of Ohio, and I know that they keep a huge.
The actual courts.
Yeah.
Statistic,
Yeah. Yeah. But as far as total filings, I mean, technically everything that you see here in the year column, those are new filings for that year. New filings. So just scroll down also into Civil Division again. Jim Weicker from the Dispatch just reported, keep scrolling down. I want to go to, I guess it doesn't, do we show the foreclosures? I'm sorry. It's under Civil Division, but it's a special case type. We just reported there's been a dip in the number of foreclosures that have been filed through our offices so far this year. Last year was pretty active, but the worst year was 2008, 2009. Those were really big years. Okay. Yeah, I would guess that E is probably the foreclosures, because see, it's 3,800 versus in 2014 it was over 5,400. Those are probably the foreclosures. And we do provide a glossary. If you go to, I think it's multimedia, the tab line multimedia, we have a glossary of terms, so all those case types are translated for you. Okay, go back to our little page. And I've already gone through auto title. I've gone through all the divisions. I've gone through online resources. I told you where to go and how to get there. And I told you that everything is still out there that you need to have access to, and some, because we did move some information around, but we also enhanced our website.